English is a worldwide language, and if you want to live, function, and thrive in this globalized world, you have to be able to speak it fluently. So one might conclude that everybody, native English speakers and non-native English speakers, consider English to be an indispensable, useful, efficient tool to make communication in general much easier. But the reality is, there are some people who are not that satisfied about English having this worldwide status for a number of reasons, and they may have a point. Hi, my name is Luca from Lampariello.com, and today we're going to explore whether English is actually getting in the way of learning other foreign languages. Let's start by exploring and taking a look at some of the disadvantages or obstacles that people might have when it comes to practicing learning foreign languages. And let's start with the perspective of native English speakers. Within the group of native English speakers, Australians, Americans, Brits, there is a group that never leaves the country and who will always live in their original country. For most native English speakers who never move abroad, well, learning a foreign language is not that important. Even if they have to deal with tourists coming to their own country, well, they do it in their own native language because they expect everybody to speak English. So living in your own country, never moving abroad, and on top of that, having English as your mother tongue, well, most often than not, it keeps you from even starting learning foreign languages. So let's consider native English speakers who actually move abroad and live abroad for a long period of time. Well, for a lot of them, speaking a foreign language is not an option because first, they think that learning the local language is too difficult, and second, local people might speak English, and third, they live within the so-called expat bubble, which allows them to speak English all the time without necessarily resorting to the local language or any other language for that matter. So, living in their own country where everybody speaks English, possibly having to do with tourists who speak their own language, and not really having to learn other foreign languages, if not at school, bits and pieces of French, Spanish, German, or whatnot, well, that's the perfect combination for I don't really need to speak other languages. Okay, now we've taken a look at the lazy categories of native English speakers, but what about the native English speakers who actually do want to learn a foreign language, be it because they're really interested in and they live in their own country, or because they move abroad and they really want to blend in, they really want to integrate in the local life. In this case, even if a native English speaker has an ironclad will to speak their local language, well, all sorts of things can actually happen that do not depend on them. Let's consider Mark, an American guy living in New York who suddenly decides to move to the Netherlands after learning Dutch for 2 years. He goes there, tries to interact with native speakers, he's really willing to use Dutch as much as he can. And much to his dismay, he actually finds out that most of the time Dutch people tend to reply to him in English. As you know, in Sweden, Norway, or the Netherlands for that matter, people speak English so well that they tend to use it and actually think they're doing you a favor by switching back to English, maybe because your Dutch, your Norwegian, or your Swedish is not still that good. So in this case, English does get a little bit in the way, be it because your level in the foreign language you're trying to practice is not good enough, or because the English of the local people is actually too good. And the funny thing is that this does not only happen with locals who master English and speak English extremely well. This actually happens to native English speakers who try to practice a local language with locals who want to practice their English because their English is not good enough. So the fact that English is a worldwide language and everybody speaks it or wants to speak it sometimes gets in the way of you learning a foreign language. And let's consider one final category. There's actually a lot more categories, but we're just considering the main ones. That is non-native English speakers who want to practice the target language. What happens then? Well, again, a lot of things can happen. They can talk to a local person they meet in a shop, on the market, wherever, and this person happens to want to speak and practice English. Or their level is not good enough, they don't feel confident, maybe they're a little bit tired, or they're just lazy and they tend to resort to English. I myself, and I will tell you in a second about my personal story, am guilty sometimes of resorting to English, and I'm not doing the right thing, I'm more doing the easy thing just because I am lazy. So let's take Mario, a guy from Rome who decides to move to Greece, and he wants to practice Greek as much as he can. Again, a number of things can happen. Let's suppose that Mario meets a person on the market and speaks Greek, and that person replies in English because he wants to practice English. Or let's suppose that Mario wants to take lessons on Skype, for example, and he wants to practice Greek. Sometimes it happens that Mario is a little bit lazy, he might be a little bit tired, and he himself resorts to English, or his tutor maybe thinks that his level of Greek is not good enough and he speaks English constantly, trying to explain Greek patterns and Greek grammars and whatnot. So there's a wide range of reasons that depend on you, that depend on the situation, that depend on the person you're talking about, for which unfortunately English kind of gets in the way of learning foreign languages. So Mark on the one hand and Mario on the other are just two very simple examples of what can happen and how English can actually get in the way of learning foreign languages. Unfortunately, we do not have time to explore all the possible situations, but this was just to give you an idea of what can happen to you and what can happen to me or anybody else for that matter when it comes to learning and practicing foreign languages. So you might think that English is that kind of bully that gets into the picture. You're taking a picture for yourself and this guy pops up and, hey, I'm there, I'm always there. But the reality is that it's not all doom and gloom, as they say. In fact, having English around as a lingua franca has a lot of benefits. So let's meet François, a Parisian who decides to move to China. He doesn't speak a word of Chinese. When he lives in China, he meets a very interesting Chinese girl who does not speak a word of French. But they both speak English. So they can actually start communicating in English, and then later they can learn each other's language. That has happened so many times across the world, and it's a great benefit and it's a great blessing to have a language through which you can immediately communicate. Another benefit of having English as a lingua franca, and this is especially for language buffs like me, is that language learning material for rarer languages is most often than not just in English. So you can leverage the knowledge that you have in English or any other lingua franca like French or Russian to learn other languages that you would not be able to learn if you just didn't speak English. English is also very, very beneficial when it comes to using translation in order to learn a foreign language. You can translate back and forth, you can compare structures with the target language, between the target language and the English language, and there's a lot of learning materials that have English on the one side and the target language on the other side. English is also a very fast and efficient tool when it comes to extracting information from your language tutor or language partner, the person you're talking to. Let's suppose that you are Italian and you're learning Greek and you're talking to your Greek tutor and you don't know how to say something. Well, you just ask, how do you say this in Greek? And you say this in English, and the other person very often speaks English well and can immediately deliver the answer. That's a very fast way of communicating and filling in the gaps by using English on and off. Of course, some purists say that it would be better to stick to the target language, and that is obviously preferable, but I don't think that that is a disadvantage. Another example of how English can be beneficial is that I, for one, am making this video exactly in English. Some of you sometimes complain that I should make more videos in other languages, truth be told, but making these videos in English easily allows me to reach a very, very wide audience and talk practically to everyone. My personal take on this is that English is neither bad or good, and I always tend to use an and logic more than an or logic. I think that it's great to use English and other languages. It's not English or other languages. Sometimes I myself will decide to use English a little bit more. Sometimes my interlocutor will reply in English. It does not matter. This still hasn't kept me from using all the languages that I've been learning in the years, and I think that it all boils down to attitude and decisions. If sometimes someone replies you in English, you can gently say, look, I've been learning this language, Dutch, be it Dutch, Greek, or any other language, for some time, and I will really practice it. Sometimes it just boils down to conveying the message and just telling your interlocutor, this is what I really want to do. It can do wonders. Referring to what I said before about the disadvantages and or advantages of using English as a lingua franca, a lot of times English has gotten a little bit in the way. For example, I myself am guilty sometimes of resorting to English when I'm not confident enough in the foreign language, or when I'm too tired, or again, when I'm lazy, be it in conversations on Skype or in real life. Surprisingly, in a lot of circumstances and countries, I do not like speaking the local language in shops or in brief interactions when I have to buy something at the supermarket, in the local shop, etc. I don't really know why, but I do remember that I was in Poland. I was with Richard Simkut. Many of you know Richard Simkut. He's a fantastic polyglot, and once I just kept using English while the main goal of being in Poland was actually speaking Polish, and he looked at me and said, "Luca, is there a problem with this?" And I said, "No, there's no problem. It's just that I don't find these short interactions very meaningful," while for him, that made his day, interacting with these people. That's the reason why he went there, he ate there, because he wanted to practice the language also in these situations. And this also happens when I have conversations in Hungarian or Greek, languages I'm actively learning, languages I'm eager to speak as much as I can with my tutors. Sometimes I resort to English to explain things that are really difficult, or sometimes I don't have a word and I ask it directly in English. So I would say that all in all, having English in my life has been a great benefit. I've never regretted speaking English, and to this day, I really like speaking it, be it with non-native or native English speakers. It has never kept me from learning other languages. It actually helped me learn other languages, and sometimes I have to accept that, using English when you're a little bit too tired, not confident, and whatnot is absolutely natural. Again, it all boils down to attitude. And now, a couple of questions for you. How has English impacted your language learning? Is English your native language or a foreign language? How have you used English to learn foreign languages? Have you ever stumbled upon people who are really proud and really stubborn about speaking English instead of letting you practice the language you want to practice? Please feel free to share all your experiences, all your methods in the comments section below. I will take some of the comments, I will read them out loud, and I will reply in a video. Once again, thanks a lot for watching, and see you very, very soon here on YouTube.